All right, everybody. Thank you for coming out. Welcome to Oasis, your premier alternative to faith-based community. I'm Nathan Bailey, and I'm going to be your MC this week. We are excited to have you all here digitally on Zoom for some interaction today with people. We know that there can be less social interaction for certain reasons today, so we're glad that you're here with us. And for anyone who's joining on Facebook, we are glad to see you here as well. Here at Oasis, if you haven't been, if this is your first time, we are committed to 5 core values at Oasis. First of all, people are more important than beliefs. Meaning comes through making a difference. Reality is known through reason. And human hands solve human problems. And finally, be accepting and be accepted. We have a really great lineup today. We have our main speaker is Erik Stafford. He's going to be speaking to us about some amazing topics that are super relevant right now with the Black Lives Matter protests, such things as Jim Crow, the meaning of Juneteenth, Emancipation Proclamation, and so on. It's going to be really exciting. I'm personally over the moon to hear about that. Our community moment is going to be our own Hannah Kim. I believe I'm pronouncing that right. And our musical talent today is going to be Jeff Harshbarger, playing some bass cello, I believe, which is also exciting. I don't think we've had that particular instrument on for a while, or I don't know if we've ever had that one on, so that's going to be very good to hear. We're going to start off a little bit with some music. I believe we have a recording ready to go. Are we ready with that?
Yeah. This is a piece from the Marcus Lewis Big Band. First off, thanks so much for having me on KC Oasis today. I really appreciate it. It's been a while since I've been around, so
Glad to have you, Jeff.
Thanks JJ for inviting me. Marcus Lewis's Big Band is one of the more fun things I get to do in town, and he took advantage of this moment in our technological history to put together this way of recording so we can still be together as a band. He sends charts and basic tracks out, and we build them in our own personal studios. Some of us just play into our cell phones and send the material back, and then he puts it all together. So it's this newer way of composing. This is a piece by Eddie Moore called A Memory of You. Features himself on the piano, and I'm going to take a bass solo near the end. Hope you guys enjoy it.
That was, I believe, a record, at least since I've been at Oasis, for the most musicians playing for us at one time. That was something else. Really, it was. I've never heard that kind of music over the internet with that kind of collaboration. It's very impressive. I loved it. I loved it. I think everyone else did too. This is kind of hard to clap for everybody, so I'll just kind of clap for everybody else. Just know that was really enjoyed. I know that the comments were very positive. I don't know if anyone's reading the comments, but everyone was just saying it's amazing, it's great, it's fun. Thank you for that so much. All right, it's about time for our community moment with Hannah Keem. If you'd get ready. Hannah Keem is going to be speaking to us for our community moment. And if you don't know what that is, it's a moment in our lineup in the morning where somebody from the community gives about 10 minutes or so, 10, maybe 15 minutes talk about something that's important in their lives. It's designed to be pretty open-ended, pretty broad, so that we can have people talking about topics that are, dear to them, or something that they've learned, or somewhere they've been. We've had people talk about everything from, global travel to, how to pick a dog breed. I think we had something about that. I mean, we've had people talk about all these different topics, and it's open-ended for a reason, and it's pretty short. So if you're not, maybe someone who feels like you're a public speaker, it's pretty short, it's pretty easy. And we do need more people to do community moments. So if you're interested in sharing a pretty much anything, appropriate, of course, but if you want to share with the community something that you have on your heart or in your back pocket, just contact Mark Dixon. Mark Dixon is here this morning, wave Mark. And you can get a hold of him on Facebook, and we'll have you set up so you can do a talk just like Hannah's going to be doing. So with no further ado, Hannah told me that she had a warning label: don't ask questions you don't want answers to. Hannah, I want you to give a brief description of a question that someone asked that they didn't want an answer to when we get you on here. But she also said that 3 words to describe her were pragmatic, compassionate, and analytical. That is a very, very good set of descriptors. Pragmatic is interesting, and it means different things. But yeah, Hannah, what is a question that someone asked you that they didn't want the answer to? I'm very curious.
I put that descriptor on, and now I can't think of a question someone's asked. They usually get more information than they want.
Okay, I gotcha. Yeah, just overflow. Yeah, I get that when people ask me about taxes or something. It's just like,
right.
You want it, like they did not know they were busting the dam of mostly unwanted information that just flows out.
Information of various levels of usefulness, yes.
Yes, and usually for me anyways, not very memorable, because most people don't care much about taxes or accounting. So. Well,
I'm studying to be an accountant, so we can geek out.
You are? Really? Like what year are you in your process?
I have about a year left of school, and then I'll be finished.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I had no idea. Yeah, that's awesome. Are you at UMKC or?
I'm online. I'm at Western Governors University.
Okay, very good. Very good. Well, take us away.
Okay, well, it's interesting that he brings up accounting, because my talk today is 10 things that I think are really interesting and you should know about cash. My name's Hannah Keim, for those of you that maybe missed the introduction. I learned most of what I know about cash from my job. I work for the Federal Reserve Bank, and in the past I've done some tellering jobs. So I've had a lot of cash pass through my hands. I am in cash services at the Federal Reserve, so this is my bread and butter. And so the first thing that I think is important to know about cash is what it actually is. I mean, it passes through our hands on a daily basis, but we don't think about how you can't just draw Jackson on a $20 bill and call it a $20 bill. I mean, what makes cash cash? And so that brings us to 1913, when the Federal Reserve was founded. Before then, cash was not standardized. There were several national banks, and they all printed their own currency, and they were accepted at various levels in different parts of the country. In 1913, the Federal Reserve was founded, and they standardized cash in 1914 as the legal tender of the United States. So any note that you come across today that says Federal Reserve note at the top and is dated 1914 or later is legal tender. And I'll talk a little bit more about some denominations of that later, because I know people have a lot of questions like, did we ever print a $3 bill? No, but it's a good question. So the second thing about cash is where it comes from. A lot of people think, oh, well, cash comes from the mint, and that's halfway true. Cash itself is printed by the Bureau of Engraving and Printing. It's a division of the Treasury. It's kind of a sister division of the mint. It's printed at the BEP, and then the Fed circulates the cash. Coin is minted at the mint and also circulated by the Fed. So it's easy to say it all comes from the mint, because ultimately it all is released to the public from the Federal Reserve. It comes straight from the BEP to us. We process it, make sure that it fits the quality standards, and then we package it up and send it out to banks so that it can get into everyone else's hands. The third interesting thing about cash, the lifespan of a bill is actually, it varies a lot depending on what denomination. It's anywhere from 4 to 23 years. The shortest lifespans are for 1s and 20s, because those are passed the most often. They're the most commonly used denominations out in circulation. 5s and 10s would be next, 50s and 100s pass the least amount of hands. And I think that's because we all like to hold on to them just a little bit longer. The fourth interesting fact I have for you is about the denominations. What is currently circulated and printed? 1s, 2s, 5s, 10s, 20s, 50s, and 100s are the currently printed and circulated bills. We do still print new 2s, and we do still put new 2s into circulation, which some people don't know, and I think that's interesting. In the past, there were also denominations between $500 and $100,000 that were printed. The $500 to $10,000 bills were circulated to the public, and occasionally we do still run across those in processing. I think we processed 4 $500 bills last year. In theory, if you take one to a bank, they are still worth face value. You hand them a $500 bill and they should give you $500 bills back. Some banks won't take them because there's some confusion about whether they're still legal currency. They are, but not all banks, not all tellers are going to be knowledgeable about that. However, they're more valuable as a collector's item than they are as currency. So if you find one in grandma's attic someday, you're better off taking it to a collector than you are to the bank. You'll probably get more for it. Bills from 20,000 to 100,000 were printed but never circulated to the public, used between Federal Reserve banks to exchange value. There probably are some out in the hands of collectors, but they weren't ever officially released to the public. We also sometimes still find silver certificates. At the time they were released, they were backed by silver dollar bills. They're no longer backed by silver. You can exchange them for a $1 bill, but you can't exchange them for a silver dollar anymore. And we do still find those in circulation sometimes too when we're processing cash. When we find those things, we do remove them from circulation, and instead of destroying them, the high denominations and silver certificates actually get sent back to the Treasury. And I'm honestly not sure what they do with them from there. I should do some further research into that. The fifth interesting thing about cash kind of gets a little into the security features. Cash is very sophisticatedly printed, and this was really interesting to me when I started at the Fed learning about this, that the printing itself is a security feature of the bill. There's 3 different type settings. The first type, they cut grooves into a metal plate, and the paper is pressed into the plate, not the plate to the paper. And it creates a textured typesetting. It's similar to embossing. If you look at that typesetting under magnification, you can see a ridge and a shadow. And you can feel it on the face of the bill. And that's actually the first thing we look at when we're trying to find counterfeits that come through our processing system, is feeling the bill for these different types of typesetting. And that's the first one we look for. The second process is a flat printing process. The image is reverse printed onto a flat piece of rubber and then pressed against the bill. So it's flat, there's not any texture to it. The third type of printing, and this is mostly evident in the Treasury seal on a bill, it's the opposite of the first type. So instead of cutting the image into lowered grooves and pressing the paper into it, this type works more like a rubber stamp, where the image is raised and then pressed onto the bill. So you have to have all 3 of these types of printing in a bill for it to be legitimate tender. There's also a proprietary paper involved. It's 75% cotton and 25% linen. And the reason that that's important is your standard paper is made from wood pulp. There's a very different texture to a bill than there is just a standard piece of paper. And anyone who's handled cash can tell that there's a difference. So if there's a texture difference to it, you might want to look at that bill a little closer to make sure that you have actual money in your hands. The ink is also proprietary. It's blended by the BEP. The back plate of a bill is all green ink. The front plate of a bill is mostly black. There are a few other exceptions for security features, but if you ever get a bill and the back of it looks wrong and it's black ink, it's not a real bill. Let's see, the sixth interesting fact I have are that when you look at bills, just any random bills in your wallet, you'll notice that there are kind of several iterations of bills, and you can tell like this is an old 100 versus a new 100. And that's because there's 3 different major style revisions of bills. The first one happened in 1929, then there was a revision in 1996 and another in 2004. And the reason that a bill would be revised is mostly to add new security features, because counterfeiters do catch up to these processes and they get better and better at what they do. So commonly counterfeited bills need to be redesigned every now and again to kind of throw that process up. So each of those added some new security features. When you see a date at the bottom of your bill, it's not necessarily the day that or the year that the bill was printed. Something about the faceplate of that bill changed that year. It could be the signature of a treasurer. It could be an actual redesign. It could be an added security feature. Sometimes it's a really small change like those signatures, but that year is indicative of something changing on the faceplate. Another interesting thing, number 7, we have never revised since 1929 a $1 bill or a $2 bill. And there's 2 reasons for this. The 2s, there's never really been a need to update the security feature on 2s. They're not commonly counterfeited, so it's not cost effective to redesign the 2s because those redesigns are expensive. The 1s, and I think this is interesting and kind of funny, it's illegal for us to redesign a 1 because of vending machines, of all things. It would be incredibly expensive to go back and reconfigure vending machines to recognize a redesign. So Congress actually passed a law prohibiting us from redesigning 1s so that you can all continue to use them in a vending machine. 1s are the only bills that also don't have a security strip or a watermark in them. So if you hold them up and there's no security strip, it's not necessarily fake. 1s don't have those. My 8th interesting fact, just a few really simple basics to finding some counterfeits. If you handle cash for a living, or if you're just curious if what's in your wallet is real or not, some real quick ways to tell. When they make the paper, they add red and blue fibers, threads to it. Those red and blue fibers, they're not printed on. They are actual physical threads in the paper. Sometimes you can even see them kind of peeling up out of your bill. Sometimes if you get a bill that has like a green or a purple thread in it, that's actually foreign currency that's been bleached and reprinted to look like American currency, and it is counterfeit. You will only ever find red or blue threads in a legitimate bill. So that's one really easy security feature, just looking at the paper to see if there are threads, if they're printed, and that they're the right color. This one I think is the single easiest way to tell, the color shifting ink on the front face of a bill. The 1996 series, the little number in the bottom of your bill, when you flip it like this, looking at the front face, it will shift from green to black and back to green when you pull it up. The new bills, the ones that have more colored faces, so the 2004 series, will go from copper to green to back. If a number in that bottom hand does not shift, that's not a real bill. Sometimes counterfeiters will add like glitter or iridescence to the ink to kind of trick the eye a little bit, maybe make you not look into it so much, but they don't often shift. It's really rare for a counterfeit to actually have color shifting ink on it. The security bands in bills also are a feature. The original security bands were added in 1990, and they were all added in the same position on every denomination. And over time with the redesigns, we've moved the band to a different position. There's diagrams out there that you can see. Those are a little more in-depth, but if the only bill that doesn't have one is a 1. So if you have 100 and it doesn't have a security band in it, you're not holding on to a real bill. The watermarks are also a easy security feature. You can hold a bill up to the light and there should be an image of the president that matches the picture in the center. Another common way that people counterfeit hundreds are bleaching legitimate $5 bills and then printing 100 features over it. But you can't remove a security band or a watermark. So if you hold 100 up to the light and you see Lincoln in the corner or a big 5 in the corner, you have a counterfeit bill. They did change the watermarks on counterfeits within the 2004 series because Lincoln was getting mistaken for Grant. So instead of using the president on 5s, they now just use a big 5, so it's really obvious that it's a $5 bill. Microprinting is another security feature. This one's difficult to see to the naked eye, but if you look under magnification, there's different spots on bills that have microprinting, and it should be very crisp and clear. If it's like cloudy or not readable, it's not a real bill. So those are some really quick security features when you're just out and about. As a cashier, that tilt for the color changing ink is great. I'm just going to say right off the bat, the pins don't work. Pins take an average of like 3 hours to develop. You're not going to be able to mark a 50 and see right away that it's fake. We do not use the pins in our process for detecting counterfeits and getting rid of those from circulation. So the 9th fact that I have, the Fed is the only organization that's authorized to destroy money, and it's actually illegal to deface it. So when your grandma writes "Happy birthday, Chad" on your $100 bill, she's committing a felony, sorry guys. And when that bill comes to us in the Fed, it's gonna end up destroyed. We don't recirculate bills that have any writing on them. We're the only ones authorized to deface a bill, and we don't even deface them. The only time we ever write on them is if they're a counterfeit and we're sending them off to be investigated. When we destroy them, they run through our processing machine and they actually get shredded. There's a really distinct shred pattern that we use so that bills can't be reconstituted. And we shred an average of $3.4 million a day in value. And that is my job. I run these bills through the machine. I shred this money. It hurts, I promise. I hate shredding that much money. $3.4 million is a lot, but that's our average of what we shred in a day to destroy. And those are just things that are like, they're either too dirty or too worn to go back into circulation. They're just not considered fit bills anymore. One last final interesting fact that I have about money is that when we find a counterfeit, we actually don't destroy those. We send them to the Secret Service. And that actually was the Secret Service's original function, was to detect and remove counterfeits from circulation and to investigate the counterfeit rings. Their protection of the president was a secondary function that came later in their existence. And I didn't know that until I started working at the Fed. And I just thought that was a really interesting thing, that their whole purpose at first was to deal with counterfeits, and that's still where we send them. So that's 10 interesting things that I know about cash. I love to geek out about cash. I know a lot more. It was hard to keep this presentation short because there's so much information. There's such intricate value holders. So if anyone ever wants to know more, wants to check out their wallet and see if you got anything suspect in it, when Oasis is back in person, I am more than happy to stand in the back of the room and geek out some more with you guys about this.
Yeah, definitely. I know I've been to the museum you guys have there. Is that going to not to encourage anyone to go, but is it going to be opening?
It should reopen again. I don't have a date for you. Right now, my department is the only active department in the Fed. Everyone else is working from home, but that is where I work. If you come to the Money Museum, wave, you can see me in my fishbowl. I'm in there processing cash on those big machines and playing in the vault. So you can come hang out and say hi to Hannah.
Oh, that'd be fun. We'll have to do that sometime. That is super cool, because I actually went to that museum for a while I was going to college, and that was, I loved that museum. It's short, it's quick
I love it too. I'm really rather partial. It's kind of home away from home at this point.
Yes, it was interesting, and yes, watching like all the stuff go through, you're like, oh my goodness, they're destroying cash. I will totally take some. And they will let you have some in those shredded bags, I think, right?
Yes, you get to take home $165 from your visit in the Money Museum. Good luck putting it back to
in
you.
Shredded cash.
Yes.
Like a little puzzle that doesn't have all the pieces. It's just a little bag of
shredded cash. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, no, that's no fun. Well, okay. Thank you so much, Hannah, for talking with us about that. We are going to break out into our not community groups. I am so sorry. We're going to break up into our breakout rooms to have a little bit more, small 5 to 10 person interactions, get We're gonna unmute you so you can talk with some people, catch up with some buddies, meet some new people. It'll be fun. When we come back, we will have some more music from Jeff, and then we will get on to our main speaker, which I'm so excited about. Julie, are we about ready for breakout rooms? Perfect. We will see you all in about 10 minutes, okay? See you then.
Oh, you did? Okay, that was hot. Is it hot again?
Well, it's warmish. I don't know what temperature is right now.
Would you like a morning hug or kiss?
Okay. 88. So it's not where I'll break. Nobody's talking.
No. Usually there is, I think there's some kind of meeting room, but we don't get to be in it, I guess. Here's Julie coming back.
I know that was chat. You were in the chat room with these people.
Hi, yeah, we're finishing up the breakout rooms, and so everybody will be back in here within the next minute, and then we'll have our featured presenter. It's good to see you guys.
I'm back. Miss anything?
Nope.
Alrighty. Think we've got everybody coming back in. Couple more seconds. Julie, have you started the recording yet or no? Okay, we're good. Perfect. Well, welcome back, everybody. Hope we didn't interrupt too many amazing conversations. No, I'm kidding. I hope that you all had amazing conversations and you were loath to come back, but we are going to make it up to you, I promise. We are going to be moving into some more music. Jeff, we are going to be hearing from you in just 1 second, but before I do that, I just want to make a couple of announcements. First of all, Van Gabriel, happy birthday. It's rough to celebrate birthdays right about now, but happy birthday, and I hope that it's going to be a great year and you have an even better one next year. And another announcement is, if you are new here, I just was talking with another Nathan here. If you are new and you want to get connected, Oasis does not just do the Sunday gatherings here on Zoom or Facebook. We also have our online community group. There is a private Oasis group as well as a public group. If you want to be more connected, ask about being added to our private group. Julie, who would someone talk to about being added to the private group? Is that you?
Yeah, it could be me. Any of the board members can add folks to the.
Mark can add somebody, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, just ask around and we can get you added to the private group page. We do a lot more stuff on there. We'll do events, nothing really in person right now, but there's other connections. Community groups meet throughout the week. So if you want to meet with a smaller group of people, you can do that as well. I meet with 10 to 15 people max, really, on a weekly basis. That is a great way to get more connected with people here at Oasis. Again, Mark Dixon, Julie Wisman, some other people can help you get connected into the community as well. And JJ, we've got that music coming up. Thank you so much.
Yeah, this next tune is I was asked to provide some music for the Kansas City Public Library on their Big Read event a few years ago. The book they chose that year was True Grit because of the success of the movie, the remake. I have an ensemble called The Revisionists where we explore early American music and the roots of it, how American music got to sound the way it sounds. And so using some historical tracing techniques to write new music in a style of things that happened at the birth of our musical nation, the early 19th century. So the book takes place in 1880, and where people kind of make a mistake is they look at, you'll frequently see in movies, historical movies, that you'll see music that was written in the year of when the movie takes place, but that's really not what's in the hearts and minds of the characters of the book. So I chose to write a tune that in the style of what's called a child ballad. It's this kind of music that came from down the Appalachian Trail from the British Isles, and so this is a lyrical song form, and in this style of this Appalachian kind of sound. And this is a brief synopsis of the book True Grit, called "How Come That Blood on Your Coat Sleeve."
Come that blood on your coat sleeve. Now, Maddie, come tell it to me. It is the blood of little black pony the father bought for me, the father bought for me. Oh, it is too red for that. Now, Maddie, come tell it to me. It is the blood of little wild turkey Ranger shot for me, Ranger shot for me. Oh, it is too red for that. Now, Maddie, come tell it to me. It is the blood of the dirty coward who shot my father by the name of Tom Cheney. Pit where I woke the rat where that took a bite of me, took up a bite of me. What you gonna do with a snake bit arm now, Maddie? Come tell it to me. Cut out the poison and wrap it in linen, and Rooster will carry me, yeah, Rooster will carry me. Tired now, Maddie, come tell it to me. Gonna whip that pony until it dies, and Rooster will carry me, Rooster will carry me. What you gonna do with a snake bit arm now, Daddy? Come tell it to me. Gonna take it to the doctor and pray to heaven he save the rest of me, save the rest of me. How come that blood on your coat sleeve now, Maddie? Come tell it to me. It is the blood of the little gritty rooster that saved the rest of me, save the rest of me.
Wonderful. Are we going to be having two, or are we moving on?
We'll move on. We'll have one more at the end.
Okay, perfect. All right. Erik, Stafford, we are going to have you come up in just 1 second. I'm going to refresh everybody's memory. If you don't remember from the earlier mention, we're going to be having this conversation about Juneteenth. the Underground Railroad Emancipation Proclamation, Police Force Origins. I saw a lot of stuff in there that was really applicable. And real quick, Erik, I want to give a shout out to your company, KC Touring Company. Are you still running that, or like how's that been affected by what's been going on?
Well, they're socially distanced tours. I don't have no more than 10 people on a tour. And, you know, so we're able to social distance because there's not so many people on the streetcar right about now. And then, you know, we're touring in open space. So the tour starts at 6 o'clock. The civil rights tour, there's a civil rights tour that starts today at 2:30 on Sundays. On Thursdays, it starts at 6 o'clock. And it starts at 30 grand. And then that tour goes to Union Station. It's the route of the streetcar. It's maybe about a half mile of walking at the very beginning. Then there's 4 designated sites that we get off at. But it's just a socially distanced tour with, I don't take no more than 10 people. Kids are free with one paid adult, and it's a limit of 2 kids per adult.
Okay. I just wanted to give a shout out for that and see, because that sounds really interesting. And I'll also, was there something, I don't know if I read it, or there was something about redlining. Was that going to be your talk, or was that part of your tour?
Well, redlining is part of the civil rights tour on the streetcar. Okay. But, you know, we may have time to discuss it today. Okay. But yes.
Well, let's, I'm, without any more talk from me, I want to hear what you have to say, please.
Okay. Well, my name's Erik Stafford. I was born and raised here in Kansas City, Missouri. Went to Raytown South High School, graduated in the class of 1987. So I was born in 1969. So one generation removed from the civil rights movement. So my father went to Lincoln High School. My mother went to Central High School. Lincoln High School was the only high school for Blacks at one point in time here in Kansas City, up until 1954, Brown versus Board of Education. And then after that, they started to integrate Central High School. So my mother, she was one of the first, her class was one of the first classes to go through Central High School. Central High School was integrating. But I've been doing tours for the past, as a business for the past maybe like 11 years. But I went to Central Missouri State University, came back and taught at a school known as Genesis School. It was a school for at-risk youth, and part of the curriculum was showcasing the African-American historic sites in the area. And from that, I developed a passion for Kansas City's history. So I've been doing it, like I said, for the last 11 years. So I do 2 tours on the streetcar, Streetcar KC, a River City Civil Rights Tour, and Streetcar KC, a River City Mafia Tour, and Bebop and Beyond 18th and Vine Walking Tour. So Kansas is named after the Kansas Indian tribe, and Missouri is named after the Missouri Indian tribe. It was Missouri's Oto Indian tribe. And Kansas, I've seen it spelled K-A-N-Z-A-A, but that's where the names of the states originate from. Okay, so everyone's heard of Shoto Traffic Way, and Shoto Traffic Way is named after Francois Shoto, who was a French fur trapper. And the French occupied the area that we are now in. It was known as Upper Louisiana. And the territory of Louisiana went from as far north as the border of Canada, as far east as the Mississippi River, as far south as the port of New Orleans, and as far west as the Colorado Rockies. All that was Louisiana. So the French also occupied a small island in the West Indies known as Haiti. They had taken slaves from the west coast of Africa, and slaves were dispersed in Brazil. A third of the slaves actually went to Brazil and South America, but also in the West Indies and along the southeastern seaboard of the United States. Well, in Haiti, they were cultivating sugar, and those slaves grew restless, and they rebelled against the French. Everyone's heard of the little short general Napoleon. So he was defeated by Toussaint Louverture, Henry Christophe, and John Dessalines. And that was one of the only successful slave revolts that had taken place throughout the transatlantic slave period, which started in 1492 with Christopher Columbus. Okay, so after that revolt, when Napoleon was defeated, when the French were defeated, at the same time, they were about to go to war with Great Britain. So they had to sell the territory of Louisiana. By the way, they had slaves in the area, the French did, during this time period. So this is around 1796, 1797. They had slaves, and they actually probably brought those slaves from Haiti, and they were brought here to this area to work in the mines. So they were extracting lead out of the mines here in this area. And so those slaves, more than likely, they spoke French. Okay, and so after that defeat, after that slave revolt, the French at the same time were about to go to war with Great Britain, so they had to sell the territory of Louisiana, and they sold it to America, the United States at the time. Thomas Jefferson was president, and we made the Louisiana Purchase for $15 million. Then the settlers, they started coming to the area. So he appointed, first of all, he appointed Thomas Jefferson, appointed Meriwether Lewis and William Clark, and they set forth on the Lewis and Clark expedition. They had with them Indian female, Sacagawea, and they also, there was York, who was a scout, hunter, and a field doctor on the expedition. Okay, so so York, he was a slave of William Clark. Okay, so he was the only person on the expedition after it was completed that he was not compensated land or money because he was considered property. So he was not paid. Okay, but he was probably one of the most valuable people or valuable pieces on the expedition because he could swim and he was a scout. So it was his job to approach the Indians whenever they were traveling. And back then, how people use the highways today, they use the rivers then. And so they used a keel boat. And so York's job as a scout, whenever they would approach land and there would be Indians there, he would jump off the boat and he would be the first to greet the Indians. And he would have to determine whether or not they were friendly or hostile and then report back as a scout. And he was also a field doctor, so he's very valuable. But he was the only person on the expedition that was not compensated because he was a slave of William Clark, a childhood slave. Anyway, after that, then the settlers started coming to the area. After that, so and they came from the southeast and they brought their slaves with them. They came from Kentucky, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, Tennessee, and Independence, Missouri is actually settled before Kansas City, Missouri, because it's east of Kansas City. So out of Independence, Missouri, you have the three trails, the California, Santa Fe, and the Oregon Trail coming out of Independence, Missouri. That's why the day they celebrate Santa Calgon Days is because of those three trails. On those trails, so the first courthouse in Independence, Missouri was built by a Black man by the name of Sam Shepherd. And that courthouse is still standing. It was built in 1827. Sam Shepherd actually, during the Civil War, he ran away to Lawrence, Kansas. And he lived to be 125 years old. Also, Hiram Young, he made stagecoaches and odd for those people traveling west. So everyone's heard of the San Francisco 49ers. Why the 49ers called the 49ers? Because of the gold rush. And most of those people came through Independence, Missouri. Okay. So after that, Missouri came into the Union as a slave state. Maine came in as a free state, and it was part of the Missouri Compromise because they needed to maintain a balance of powers in the House of Representatives because it's based upon population. And slaves counted as 3/5 of a person for the purpose of taxation and representation in the House of Representatives. In the Senate, everybody has 2 senators regardless of the size of the state, but in the Senate, but in the House of Representatives, it's based upon population. So slaves counted as 3/5 of a person for the purpose of taxation and representation in the House. So Missouri came into the Union as a slave state. Maine came in as a free state as part of the Missouri Compromise. The Missouri settlers, they came here for the purpose of producing hemp and tobacco. Okay, and so after that, also a little bit before that, Andrew Jackson in 1812, I forgot to mention it because I'm gonna try to go in chronological order so everything makes sense. And the whole point in this is to make it make sense today. That's the whole point in studying history. But Andrew Jackson in the War of 1812, they extended the war into 1814, but Andrew Jackson was going into New Orleans. He was about to prepare for battle with the British. And as they were encroaching upon New Orleans, he needed help. So he went to a plantation excuse me, he went to a plantation owned by Calvin Smith. And he went and gathered the slaves there. It's about 400 of them, and told them that, well, if the British are coming, and if you help us in this battle, we will grant you your freedom. Okay, so the war took place, the battle took place, and one slave in particular, his name was James Roberts. He documents the event in his slave narratives. But at the time, he was in his 60s. He was in his early 60s, but he fought in that battle with Andrew Jackson, and he actually beheaded 6 people while he was in the 60s. But anyway, when the war came to an end, Andrew Jackson, he called the soldiers in and made them take out all their ammunition and told them they had to leave town and go back to their masters. And then when they inquired about their freedom, he said, well, I never owned you, so I can't set you free. So in 1820, Missouri, that was in 1814, 1820, Missouri came into the 1821. I'm sorry, Missouri came into the Union as a slave state. Maine came in as a free state. In 1831, Andrew Jackson, by this time, he's president, and he signed the Indian Removal Act in 1831, which moved the Indians west. So you have the Shawnee Indian and you have the Wyandotte Indian being relocated from the Ohio River Valley. Okay, and so the Shawnee were given they were brought into the Shawnee Indian Mission by the Reverend Thomas Johnson. And there at the Shawnee Indian Mission, they were forced to change the way they talked. They could not talk in their native tongue. They had to cut their hair. They had to change the way they dressed. They had to change the food they ate, and they were taught the Bible by the Reverend Thomas Johnson. The Wyandotte were given land for relocating. Okay, and so in 1831, in 1847, Missouri legislature by this time had passed a law that made it illegal to teach blacks, slave or free, how to read. Okay, and one of the reasons is because of the slave revolts that took place in the 1830s along a lot, like in South Carolina and Virginia. There were slave revolts led by Nat Turner and Denmark Vesey, and those slave revolts were inspired by the children of Israel in the Bible, by the Hebrew children, and when they were enslaved by the Egyptians. That story inspired those slave revolts. So that's why they made it illegal to teach blacks, slave or free, how to read. And it was also illegal for blacks to hold a church service without whites being present. So that was passed in 1847. So there was a black man by the name of John Berry Meacham who started the first African Baptist church in St. Louis, Missouri. And there in the basement of the church, he taught blacks to read. So that was the first thing a runaway slave needed to do, was learn how to read. Because you could literally maybe come to a crossroads that says Mississippi to the left and Kansas to the right, or even better, Missouri to the left, Kansas to the right. And Kansas had the opportunity to be a free state. You at least had the opportunity to be a free state if you went over into Kansas, because in 1847, they passed a law, made it illegal to teach blacks, slave or free, how to read. John Berry Meacham, after that law was passed, before he was teaching blacks to read in the basement of his church, but after the law was passed, then he was a carpenter by trade. So he built a boat and parked it in the Mississippi River, which was under the jurisdiction of the state of Missouri, because it was in the water, so it's under federal jurisdiction. And there on the boat, he taught runaways how to read. And James Milton Turner was a student on John Berry Meacham's boat. Okay. So that was in 1847. In 1854, Kansas now has enough people in its territory to apply to the Union to become a state. But the question is, would it be a free state or a slave state? So the Missouri Compromise stated that slavery was not to exist north of the 3630 Mason-Dixon line. Okay, but Missouri slave owners were apprehensive about Kansas coming into the Union as a free state, because then their slaves would be able to cross over the water where they would have the perception of being free. But one reason why Missouri never left the Union is because they had the protection of the Fugitive Slave Law Act, which allowed for their slaves to be recovered if they were to run away. So slave patrollers would hide along the banks of the Missouri River, and they would try to catch runaway slaves crossing over into Kansas, where they would have the perception of being free, because just because they made it over into Kansas does not mean that they would be set free. They could always be caught and brought back over to their slave master. So that's why when a runaway slave ran away, the master would create a poster with a bounty on it saying, well, $200, $300, $500 as a reward for the return of their slave. Okay. So in 1854, Kansas had enough people in its territory to apply to the Union to become a state, but the question was, Missouri slave owners still did not want their slaves being able to cross over into Kansas. So they went over into Kansas and voted illegally for Kansas to come into the Union as a slave state. So the Missouri Compromise was actually repealed by David Rice Atchison, and many have heard of Atchison, Kansas, but it's named after David Rice Atchison, who was a Missouri senator, and he was able to get the Missouri Compromise repealed with the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which gave Kansas the opportunity to vote for itself, whether it be a free state or a slave state, through popular sovereignty. So they voted at the Shawnee Indian Mission, which was established by the Reverend Thomas Johnson, and Johnson County is named after him. The Reverend Thomas Johnson actually owned slaves in the state of Kansas. Even though Kansas was a free state, the Reverend Thomas Johnson owned slaves, okay, in the state of Kansas. But they had, and it was also the site of the first territorial government of Kansas, was at the Shawnee Indian Mission. And there at that Indian Mission, they had several illegal elections, and Missouri slave owners went into Kansas and voted for Kansas to be a slave state. But those elections were illegal. But this begins the beginning of the Civil War, which actually starts in this area first in 1854 with the signing of the Kansas-Nebraska Act. So this area was referred to as Bleeding Kansas. So many people, everyone's heard of the Kansas Jayhawks. The Kansas Jayhawks were actually slave abolitionists, and they came here for the purpose of stopping the expansion of slavery. Okay, and so this area was referred to as Bleeding Kansas. There's a statue of John Brown over in Quindaro, and Quindaro was established by the Wyandotte Indians and the Kansas Jayhawks as a port of entry. It was a city. It was established as a port of entry for those people that wanted Kansas to come into the Union as a free state. They could come in by way of Quindaro and then go on into Leavenworth, Kansas, or Lawrence, Kansas, and on up into Ohio. But Quindaro was right off the Missouri River, and it was established as a port of entry for those people that wanted Kansas to come into the Union as a free state. Also, so the Civil War, like I said, it started here first with the signing of the Kansas-Nebraska Act before its official start here in South Carolina in 1861. So the Confederates were winning the war when it began, and Lincoln, his whole objective in going into war was to save the Union. That was it. And he's quoted as saying that, you know, if he could save the Union by allowing some slaves to be free and by having some remain enslaved, he would do that. He also stated if he could save the Union by maintaining slavery, he would do that. Or if he had to let all the slaves free, set all the slaves free in order to save the Union, he was prepared to do that. But that was his whole goal in going into war, going into the Civil War. But Lincoln, he signed, the South was winning the war, and Lincoln, he signed the Emancipation Proclamation in January. He actually signed it in 1862, but it went into effect January 1st of 1861. Wanted to keep in mind the slave patrollers that we talked about earlier, who would catch runaway slaves, because they're going to come back up a little bit further down the line in this lecture, but not too much further down the line. But those slave patrollers, they were used to catch runaway slaves during the time period known as the antebellum period. But so the Civil War, with the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation, Blacks were then able to join the war effort. However, the Senator Jim Lane, who at the time he was not a senator, but he was a Kansas Jayhawk, he recruited Blacks to fight in the 1st Kansas Colored Infantry before Lincoln legalized recruiting Blacks into the Union. Okay, and so there was also some slaves that fought with the Confederacy. There was a slave by the name of John Nolan who fought with the Bloody Bill Anderson and William Quantrell. So blacks fought on both sides. But so when Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation and it went into effect in January 10 of 1863, that's when blacks were allowed to join the Union and fight for their freedom. But before that, you had the first Kansas colored infantry that was recruited by Jim Lane, and they fought in the Battle of Island Mound. They also fought in the Battle of Poison Springs. In the Battle of Poison Springs, all of the colored troops were killed. None were taken as prisoners. Even the wounded that were left on the battlefield, all of them were killed. Okay. And so, but in 1863, after the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation, you have colored troops partaking in the Civil War. One colored troop of note is the Douglas Battery. And Douglas Battery, they fought in the Battle of Westport. And after the Battle of Westport, the South was defeated, and it was known as the Gettysburg of the West. But then during that time period, and so after that, after the end of the Civil War, as it came to an end, General Gordon Granger was assigned to go into Texas. And a lot of people in Texas did not get word that the Civil War had actually ended. And so some of the slaves were still working on their plantations because they didn't know that the Civil War ended. So General Gordon Granger went into Galveston, Texas to occupy it as a Union general. And he read General Order number 3 to thousands of slaves. And that moment was celebrated as Juneteenth. It was around this time that the slaves got into Galveston, Texas, around this time of the month. It's also sometimes more so celebrated between June 15th and June 19th. And so that celebration started in Galveston, Texas, and it went on all the way, and it's still going on today. The person that brought that celebration here to Kansas City, Missouri, is the founder of the Black Archives. His name is Horace Peterson, and he brought that celebration here to Kansas City, Missouri in 1981. And Juneteenth, the Juneteenth celebration here in Kansas City grew to be the second largest Juneteenth celebration in the nation. And his legacy is still going strong today. It's reflected in his daughter, and right now they're having a virtual Juneteenth celebration. It's going on now. And so she's been doing it every year, but he's the founder of the Black Archives of Mid-America, Horace Peterson. He founded the Black Archives of Mid-America in 1971, and in 1981, he started the Juneteenth celebration. And so that celebration commemorates the freeing of the slaves. But after the Civil War, the United States went through that time period known as Reconstruction. And during that time period, they added the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to the Constitution. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery except in the event that you commit a crime. And so what many people are now starting to realize is that slavery still exists today, and it's manifested through the criminal justice system. The United States of America imprisons more of its own people than any other country in the world. Prisons are privatized now. Also, you have the 14th Amendment, and the 14th Amendment was equal protection of the law, which is not being realized today when you look at the number of the amount of cases, police brutality cases inflicted upon African Americans still to this day, and those police officers going acquitted, and you have the whole world is now in a national uproar behind that amendment not being enforced. And it has never been enforced. That's equal protection of the law. And then there's the 15th Amendment, which is it gave blacks the right to vote. Now, if you're a convicted felon, however, if you're a convicted felon, you no longer have the right to vote. But your voting rights can be restored once you are no longer on probation or parole. You can have your voting rights restored. So you also have, during Reconstruction, you had the first public schools established. So Penn School was established here in Kansas City in Westport. It's actually, if everyone's familiar with the Country Club Plaza, but then there's the Embassy Suites that is near the Country Club Plaza. It would be going north, and on the west side of the Embassy Suites, there's some land there. And on that land, there's a rock wall. And the plaque, there was once upon a time, there was a plaque on that wall that commemorated Penn School, which was the first school west of the Mississippi River set up for the express purpose of teaching freed men. Okay, so Charlie Parker actually went to that school. And he was in the 4th grade where he received his first saxophone. It was a 2-room schoolhouse. That school, it burned down in 1955, right after Brown versus Board of Education. Then you have, also during that time period, during Reconstruction, you had the police force being created. In 1874, the Kansas City Police Force was created. There was no police force during slavery. The only police force during slavery was the slave patrols that caught runaway slaves. So during 1874, those slave patrollers became the police force during Reconstruction. So that's when you have the police force being formed here or created here in Kansas City, Missouri. So after Reconstruction, there was also another holiday associated with the freeing of the slaves, and it's called a watch night. And that happens every New Year's Eve. So that was a watch night that occurred December 31st, 1862. It was a night to watch as to whether or not Abraham Lincoln would sign the Emancipation Proclamation into law. Now, the Emancipation Proclamation, once it was signed, it did not set the slaves in Missouri free. I need to mention that point. It did not set the slaves in Missouri free. It only freed those slaves that were in states that had rebelled against the Union. Okay. Also, I forgot to mention the Dred Scott case that took place in 1857, which stated Dred Scott, he tried to sue for his freedom, and the United States Supreme Court said that Blacks did not have any rights and they were not considered citizens. First of all, they weren't considered citizens, so therefore they had no rights and could not bring suit in the legal courts of America. Okay, but during that time period, so laws were established to give Blacks citizenship in 1866. Then you also have public accommodation laws as well that said it was illegal to discriminate against Blacks in public facilities. But after, so that was during Reconstruction. So those new laws were passed. However, in 1877, Rutherford B. Hayes, he was trying to gain the support of the Democratic vote, and he made a deal known as the Great Compromise, where he removed troops from the South, removed federal troops from the South to protect the lives of Blacks that had just been set free after slavery. And when he made that deal, giving the states their rights back, once he did that, Blacks were they found themselves in competition with whites for the same jobs. And so organizations like the Ku Klux Klan, who were threatened by the fact that Blacks were now competing with them for the same jobs, they started harassing Blacks and terrorizing Blacks. And a lot of Blacks, even after slavery, they stayed on those plantations and worked as sharecroppers, which was nothing more than an extension of slavery in itself. So if anyone's not familiar with the way sharecropping worked, was that you work for a share of the crop that was owned by the planter. But the problem was you got your seed, your tools, the land was his, the clothes that you wore, the food that you ate, all your shelter was given to you by him. And also he weighed the cotton that you picked and he kept the books. So when it came time for harvest, people always owed, Blacks always owed. So they could not leave the land while they still owed. So a lot of them, they left the South and they came to Kansas, believe it or not. Kansas was promoted as the promised Blacks. And you have settlements like Nicodemus, Kansas, that was established during this time period. And people still go to Nicodemus, Kansas every year they have an annual reunion there for the people that are from there. A lot of those people that founded Nicodemus, Kansas, they came from Kentucky. But a lot of Blacks came here and they settled in the West Bottoms, on the east side of the West Bottoms, in a section known as Hell's Half Acre, and they actually helped build the Hannibal Bridge. And once we built the Hannibal Bridge, we became the second largest livestock exchange in the nation, second only to Chicago. And Blacks made up 25% of the labor force in the West Bottoms. And Blacks and whites lived amongst each other here in Kansas City up until Plessy versus Ferguson, separate but equal. And then they began to separate Blacks from whites, and Blacks were confined to certain areas. Most Blacks lived between 12th and 18th Street between Troost and Benton. But that's just kind of some background and some history as to how we got to where we are today. I do want to say that racism is a cultural construct, meaning it was man-made, and it was used as a tool to justify the exploitation of one group by another. During cotton, during the time of slavery, America produced 3/4 of the world's cotton supply was produced off the backs of slave labor, and they had to justify it, and they did it by way of racism. So I want to just take this time to take any questions that people may have, or.
Yeah, if you have questions for Erik, just put those in the chat down below. Just you can send them to me, or you can send them to everybody. I don't know if you're on Facebook, you might be able to message me, and I might get those too, but prefer Zoom if you can swing that. We do have one quick question first from Julie. When you take people on tours, do they realize that Kansas had battlefields had that role in the Civil War?
They do. Well, I point that out in my tour. Now, whether or not they have any prior knowledge of it is kind of like one of those things. It just depends on that person. But in general, people don't realize that the Civil War actually started here first, and they don't understand the just how polarizing it was here in this area. Like Reverend Thomas James, they fought on both sides. Some two fought for the Confederate, and one fought for the Union. I see a question in here about redlining. I can address that, or
yeah.
So redlining occurred. So Blacks were confined in certain areas. Okay, they could not live past 21st Street. They could not live south of 21st Street, and they lived south of the Missouri River and north of 21st Street. Okay, and now in 1948, they stopped enforcing restrictive covenants. There was a case in St. Louis called the Shelley case, and it went to the federal courts, and they said they no longer could enforce restrictive covenants. That's like J.C. Nichols. He used restrictive covenants in the deeds that were attached to his property. Those restrictive covenants stated that if you purchase this property, you cannot rent or sell to a Negro or a Jew. Okay, and so with them, when they stopped enforcing those covenants, Blacks were able to move to areas like the Santa Fe neighborhood, which is like on 31st and Prospect. Okay, between 31st and Prospect and 27th in Indiana, it's known as the Santa Fe neighborhood. And so when Blacks started moving in that area, so a Black person would move in that area, and then the real estate agent that sold the Black person that property would tell the neighbors that a Black person just moved in your area, and so your property value is immediately going to go down. So then they would short sale those homes. Okay, and then those homes, those neighborhoods were redlined. Okay, and with them being redlined, and that was just a standard way of doing real estate. They would redline those districts, and those districts would be charged higher rates of insurance And also those districts were denied FHA loans and loans to, put value back into their homes. So with those homes being denied, with those homeowners being denied loans, their properties depreciated over time. And so you have neighborhoods, not just Santa Fe, but like the Blue Hills area, which is pretty much between 47th and Paseo to 60, 47th, it starts around 47th and Paseo and goes to like 63rd and Prospect, is the Blue Hills area. But that area within a matter, because of redlining and because of people not being able to get loans on their homes, those areas, whites fled those areas and blacks moved into those areas. And so the schools also reflected the neighborhoods as well. So those schools that were like Paseo and Central went from 75% black to 75% white in 1965 to by 1969, those schools had flip-flop from being 75% white to 75% black. And the neighborhoods reflected that as well. But it was based upon redlining because people fled those areas, and those areas weren't allowed to get loans, and they were charged higher insurance rates. And it was a trickle-down effect. So, yes. Any other questions?
So there's, I think, 2 more questions before we go. First of all, from Carol, how long did slavery last after the Civil War? How long did it take before the Emancipation Proclamation took effect? Was it, I know Texas was probably the last one, but Missouri, did they hold out?
Yeah, slaves in Missouri weren't set free till January of 1865.
2 years.
So, 2 years. Yes, 2 years. So you have actual Civil War battles continue. The Emancipation Proclamation did not end the Civil War. It just freed the slaves that were in states that had rebelled against the Union. And Missouri never left the Union because, for one reason, they had the protection of the Fugitive Slave Law Act. So slavery still existed in Missouri even after the Emancipation Proclamation. Yes, they weren't for up to 2 years.
Okay.
Because go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to ask the next question if you're not done. Continue.
No, the Battle of Westport actually happened after the Emancipation Proclamation.
I see. All right, and then this is a question for me. I know that redlining and Reese Nichols had a fair amount to do with segregation, with the title restrictions and such things, but we're still one of the most segregated cities in the country, as far as I'm aware. Is there any kind of political or social mechanisms that are working to help break down some of those segregation divisions that have just continued on since redlining?
I believe there are. I believe that there's certain groups. There's a race equity inclusion group that's ran by a good friend, friends of mine, Stephanie and Rodney Smith. Then there's a lot of different organizations, a lot of different justice organizations that are out here that are kind of trying to make things a lot more equal. But I think first and foremost, it has a lot to do with education. And a lot of things just weren't made relevant to us. And a lot of things weren't taught to us to create, division. So I think the more that we're able to educate ourselves and the more we understand why certain things are in place, why was there racism in the first place? When did it begin? Okay. So it's a cultural concept. It's man-made. It's a myth. So people understand this, but normal people, we get, when I say normal people, but I mean, people, it gets ingrained over and over and over and over. And you have to understand our whole system, our whole country was built upon oppression. One group exploiting another. Even the Parks and Boulevards system, when it was designed to create barriers between the haves and the have-nots. And that was the infrastructure that was there. That's why, like let's say here in Kansas City, you'll have a park. There's 2 parks like on 27th and Brooklyn. there's a statue of Bernard Powell. He started SAC 20, Social Action Committee of 20, right after the riots here in Kansas City. And he was assassinated. But there's a park named in his honor, Spring Valley Park. Then there's another park called Cruz Park, okay? But Cruz Park, Spring Valley Park and Cruz Park were created to create a buffer between the blacks and whites during the 1920s. So a huge, I mean, and these parks are huge, but so it's the infrastructure that's in place.
Yeah.
And so a lot of barriers need to be broken down. I mean, but I think it mainly comes from education. But when you understand that, you know, race is a cultural construct that is man-made, because any two groups of people can procreate. A Mexican and a Japanese can have a kid, and then what race is that person? Mexican, Japanese. I mean, you run out of racial classifications. They go on and on and on and on. So it just really makes no sense. It's a racial construct, but they used it, and it was ingrained and was passed down from generations to generations to generations. But it was popularized through popular culture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And,
well, thank you so much. Sorry.
Yeah. So yeah,
we do need to maybe move on a little bit, but we could talk about this forever, I'm sure. And Erik, I do look forward to maybe getting to one of your tours, because it's personally been something very interesting to me to find out how much red lighting has had a effect upon Kansas City specifically, and that's something that I think that everybody should do. For again, Casey Tour Company is Erik's tours for Kansas City. You can find out, I'm sure, much more if you manage to find that time to go out there. And with that, we're gonna. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's kansascitytourcompany.com.
kansascitytourcompany.com. Perfect.
Yes,
yeah,
I'll spell that.
Oh, there we go. And it is, and thank you so much, Rebecca, for putting that down in the description. Again, just make sure that you're safe, everybody. But this is a issue that has been ongoing for long enough, and I think everyone wants to know as much about it so we can maybe work towards fixing it, especially with what's been going on. Very much appreciated, Erik. Thank you so much for being here. All right.
All right. Thank you.
Yes. Round of applause, everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah. Growing up, none of this is something that I was aware of growing up. Nobody would discuss it, and so this is really a treat personally for me to hear more about this. So now it's time to move on to some music. If JJ, you can get ready to come up. We also would like to give you all the opportunity to give to Oasis. We are a 501c3 nonprofit, so donations are tax deductible. If you look down below, Julie has posted for you a website where you can donate to Kansas City Oasis. And I have put down there a phone number where you can text and find out how to give as well. That's an easy way to give, just text that number. We are, of course, affected by the virus just like anybody else. If you have the ability and the desire to support the community here and what we do, creating space for social interaction and human community without religion, consider giving to us. Thank you so much for being here, and we're gonna have some music.
Jeff, thanks a lot for hooking us up with all of this. The links were really good, and I really appreciate everything you've done around the city for the music.
Thank you, JJ. Thanks again for having me part of this. I've always enjoyed playing for the Oasis. The last selection I'm putting up today is one of my favorite performances I've done in Kansas City. Was last fall with the Owen Cox Dance Group. They're just an absolutely fantastic original dance company. Jennifer Owen is the choreographer. Brad Cox is the main composer. And this particular gig was at Polsky Theater, where they choreographed the entirety of Crystal Warren's double record Love Songs. So this is probably one of my most one of the most effective and my favorite pieces of choreography from that evening. This is called Buddy.
Stepped into my dreams one night and slept between our sides. Made lies of all the things we said and questioned you and I heard a call from empty rooms. It cooled the bed we made. You were too quiet to listen. I spoke being afraid. I'm choosing my battles. You're clutching your shield. This wasn't part of the deal, no. This wasn't part of the deal, no. This wasn't part of the deal. This wasn't part of the deal, no. 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 This wasn't part of the deal. This wasn't part.
Very good. Very good. If you didn't know, we had a question about who was the dance group as well. That was Owen and Cox Dance Group with Jeff Harshbarger in the musical team there. We want to just close out here today with thanks again to Jeff for bringing that beautiful music. That was amazing, and the dance element was actually very unique as well. I don't know if we've had live music and dance routines together at Oasis before. I know we've had dance, I know we've had music, so that is very unique as well. Thank you, Hannah Keem, for giving us a talk about cash, and Erik Stafford for talking with us about race relations and the history of racism in the United States. That's very near and dear to all of our hearts here at Oasis, because we think that human hands should solve human problems, and we know that our work is not done as a society. So thank you for bringing that up, and we look forward to having you back again sometime. For anybody else who is here, we just want to say thank you for coming. We will be here next week on Zoom and Facebook. If you would like to see the recording of this, we will have the recording up on our Facebook page, both the Zoom and the live feed from Facebook. So you can most certainly re-listen to some of the amazing things that happen here, the music and the talks. I know I want to. And we will see you next week. Thank you for being here, and stay safe.